The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Masculinity is never an easy topic, and what it means to be a Black man, perhaps even more so. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Tonight, we return to a conversation that sticks with us for its thoughtful, honest reflection on that complex subject. It was inspired by the 2017 Oscars, but ranges into far wider territory about performing up to the expectations of others. In the past year, conversations around race and diversity have expanded to many walks of life. Since this discussion first aired, only one Black actor has received an Oscar nomination for Best Actor, and that was the late Chadwick Boseman. He was nominated for his leading role in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. After he passed away at just 43 years old last summer, he became the first African-American actor to receive a posthumous nomination. There have also been 4 nominations for Black supporting actors, 2 of whom won, Mahershala Ali for Green Book and Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah. But Black representation continues to be lacking at other award shows as well. This past year, after a campaign called #TimesUpGlobes, the Golden Globes, during its awards ceremony, addressed the fact that there are no Black members in the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, the group of journalists who vote for the Golden Globe winners. The wider conversation about masculinity and the roles available to Black men is, of course, ongoing. Here's what we heard in 2017.
I like the range that we were able to see in Moonlight, right? We saw, of all the characters, we saw a range of Black masculinities, and I thought that was humanizing, in that we can see the stereotype that we often see of the drug dealer, but we can also see a humanized side of him. We can see a young boy moving through his life and coming to terms with his identity and growing his identity, actually being an agent, being active in taking information in and trying to shape who he's going to be, whether that's protecting his desires and his actual orientation or protecting his body, but there's a way in which we can read Black masculinity in a much wider range or scope in that one film.
Jonathan?
They should have a trigger warning for if you're a Black male, because it is our story, and because we've lived it, we're not rushing to see it again on TV because it is so traumatic, and does reopen wounds that you've just begun to heal. But they were beautifully done, and I'm so glad I saw them, because the buzz is, you can't go anywhere without hearing about Moonlight or Fences, and the performances are amazing by all of the actors in the films. I'm grateful that these films are now having wide theatrical releases, and people are getting a chance to see them that wouldn't have a chance to see them, or wouldn't want to see them, because it doesn't really affect their circle, because it does create that conversation and that dialogue that's been needed to be said, I think, for a very long time.
Cameron, why do you think these movies got so much attention this year?
It took a while for them to get so much attention. I remember we showed Moonlight at the Toronto Film Festival, and there were some people who knew Barry Jenkins's work and were excited to see the film, but a lot of people didn't know about it at all. And then we were able to have the film in our Lightbox cinema from about November, and it was a slow burn. Initially, there were some people who found out about it through their own channels. They follow movies, they're cinephiles. But for a long time, you'd ask people, do you know about this movie, Moonlight? You gotta see Moonlight. And they'd be like, what's Moonlight? Now everybody knows about Moonlight. Of course, it has been picking up awards in North America and all over the world. And I think the thing about, it's too close to home, I think that's part of it as well. Certainly among the Black community, some people felt like, I don't need to see Moonlight, I don't need to see Fences, I live this world. And that to me speaks to a very important point, which is what you were saying earlier, we don't see our ordinary lives on screen very often. We're used to the lives of ordinary people being white people, because Hollywood gives us that. Fact is, 1 out of every 8 people in America is an African American, but is 1 out of every 8 movies about an African American as an ordinary person? Absolutely not. When I was studying in school, I studied Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman over and over and over again. The American everyman, right? But the character that Denzel Washington plays in Fences is also the American everyman. And it's taken us a while to come around to that, to see these stories as ordinary stories.
Well, Trevante Rhodes, who plays the adult version of Chiron, said this. Growing up, you're told that being a black man, you have to be that much better than your counterparts. You have to be stronger, more masculine, and the most dominant force in the room at all times. So that automatically puts up that block, and you don't think it's possible to have any kind of vulnerability about you. Did anyone else feel that growing up, Wesley?
Oh yeah, as a black gay man growing up in Trinidad, hypermasculinity as performance is a necessary tool for survival. And hypermasculinity as performance, not only is it survival, it just erases any form of policing and question of your sexual orientation from others, in particular within the context of religious communities and among your peers. You are expected to have many girlfriends as a young black man growing up in the Caribbean. So if you were not doing that, then a performance can erase any questions of tenderness, of ephebophobia. So I think he's right when he says that he had to be tough in order to survive.
Maurice, let's go around the table.
Yes, I would certainly agree. I mean, coming from the Caribbean myself, I'm from Jamaica, and there was an expectation that in our patriarchal society, men don't show emotion. And as I shared earlier with someone, I cannot cry now. And it's very debilitating for me. No matter how devastating the situation is, I cannot cry.
At all.
At all. And, I force myself, I try to. It's very sad because I have a 16-year-old son who I hope is able to show emotion because it's so important. It's very cleansing.
So what do you do then when you feel that need to cry? Like, how do you express that pain?
I mean, I get very depressed, but I can't cry. And you feel the burning, I feel the need to express it, but I just can't. Parents who are ill, family members who die, I can't express it in the way that, I hate to say this, women can, but I just can't.
Because as a black man, you're not supposed to.
I'm not expected to cry. And as Wesley pointed out, the performance, the need to be macho or tough has impacted my life professionally as well. I used to be a flight attendant. And as everybody knows, 75% of flight attendants are gay.
Does everybody know that?
But my boss at the time told me that I needed to stand in front of a mirror, try to deepen my voice, and act more macho. Because passengers were complaining that I looked too gay. So I know.
That must have hurt?
Yes, I know I have to police my walk and try and toughen up when I'm in that that space. As a result, I don't know what my real gait is. I don't know what the real Maurice is.
Because you've been edited so much.
I've been edited, I've been policing myself so much. And it's very debilitating, very, very debilitating.
Jonathan, you grew up in the GTA, in Greater Toronto area. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What was your experience like?
I was lucky to have been raised by a village of women. My two grandmothers raised me as an only child in the household, and my mother and my aunts were all a part of the family. My father was in my life and supported me, but wasn't in the household. So I didn't have that pressure to be hypermasculine or to perform a certain role to get by.
So do you think that comes from the father, not the mother, not the woman?
I think it comes from the lack of having a father figure in my life, that his, pressures weren't passed down onto me. So I was nurtured and caring was important in our household, and empathy and compassion and expressing yourself creatively, that was more encouraged because I was raised by women. So I was able to get into the arts at a really young age and not have to modify my behavior, personality within my family. Once I got into junior high and even elementary school and junior high, it was where I had to sort of put on that facade. So where did
those expectations come from then? From your classmates?
I think my classmates and I guess their families and the culture and their fathers as well.
Can I just say, I think there's maybe something worth underlining here, which is that for all of us, I think we are aware that masculinity is a performance. I think and femininity also is a performance, and I think most people understand that if they're aware of what they put on before they go out the door and how they talk to people. But pop culture has a big part to play here. most of us are surrounded by hypermasculine images of black men, which come from sports media, which come from music media, which come from the images and the tropes that are broadcast at us. And so when we go out into the world, we are in a way either speaking through or speaking against those images that are already out there of the hypermasculine rapper, the hypermasculine football player, the hypermasculine athlete. Even in movies, you often see, Denzel Washington won his Academy Award for Training Day, right? Like another hypermasculine black male.
Where he was playing like a rogue cop.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, both Fences and especially Moonlight are giving us images that are counter to that, but we live with that every day, and I think that's worth pointing out. I think.
Mark?
I should also add to that is that we get rewarded in our society for performing a type of masculinity that people can relate to from the movies, from sports, from music videos. You get rewarded in the public sphere for those kinds of performances.
So do movies like Fences and Moonlight help to combat those stereotypes?
Not yet.
No,
I think we're about 40 or 50 years of
Yeah.
media away
Yeah.
from there being some sort of public realm where there's a wider range in which performances of masculinity will be allowed. And the reason why I say that is that the people that reward us is, not just our coaches on teams, right? If you played a sport, but if you're courting a mate, right? Man or woman, that person has certain ideologies of how your masculinity should be performed. And if you don't perform to their liking, right, then you're without a partner. So there's a bunch of ways, like in your profession, right? Like I'm a professor and I'm trained as a high school teacher. There's certain ways in which classroom management and all of these kinds of things are expected to be performed by a heterosexual male, and you'll be rewarded for performing them in a particular kind of way.
Wesley?
No, and also, taking up on his point is that I think also too, we also have to look at the sexualization of racism as a reward.
What does that mean?
The stereotypes embedded within black masculinity as where black men in particular are a penis and nothing else. So the tropes of black masculinity in terms of one of the rewards also is how some black men who have not come to terms with emotions and come to terms with setting boundaries between themselves and how you treat people, this sexualization trope can sometimes become a reward for some who misunderstand it. So there are ways in which my students sometimes will tell me I'm not gay, no matter how much I say that to them. So and it's because you just remember you see what you want to see. So that gaze, we never can stop that gaze of what the black body looks like when you see it. So the sexualization of racism plays a major role in terms of how our performance of hypermasculinity gets played out and also gets taken up and consumed, in particular by white culture.
Maurice?
So I come from a small society, and I think that, research has proven that in smaller societies, change can happen quicker through contact. And I certainly think these kinds of movies will help to disrupt the narrative that men can only be a certain way, because the major cultural agent right now is the evangelical church in Jamaica. And they get to spew their message of this is what society should look like every weekend. But unless we try to deliberately disrupt it through the media, through screenings of these kinds of films, we will be stuck where we are. And I think one of the examples I use is in the United States, Will and Grace, The New Normal, those kinds of images helped to normalize, I hate to use those terms, white gayness. White gayness.
Yeah.
White gayness.
We are not there yet.
But the point is, the hostility towards LGBT people was lessened because of the power of those images. I think that we need more of those images, and that is one of the reasons, for example, there's a film I'm in called The Abominable Crime. We deliberately take it around the island to small pockets, to have conversations.
Do you do it in public, though, or do you do it very quietly?
Yes,
oh, really?
yes. We do have the screenings in public. They don't know what this film is about. It's just called The Abominable Crime. It could be anything. And we do it deliberately to have conversations, because the film will not be aired on national television. It's just banned from being aired on
Would a
national.
movie like Moonlight be screened in Jamaica?
No, that's a good question, because when Brokeback Mountain aired in Jamaica, it caused quite a bit of consternation. It was aired at a national cinema, but then I think the evangelicals got riled up, and I don't know. I'm really curious to see how Moonlight will play.
And Cameron, what do you think? Do you think like movies like Fences and Moonlight, creating dialogue, do you think that they could be used to combat stereotypes?
Absolutely. I think art can do that at its best, and there's superb writing, direction, and performances in both of these movies. I think if you watch a character like Chiron, particularly when he's played by the last actor, Trevante Rhodes, as an adult, and you see him, and he's got ripped abs, and he's very muscular, and he's got the fronts, and he's got this kind of a very kind of quote-unquote thug image, which is that hypermasculine image, but he's struggling with his sexuality. He's incredibly vulnerable. He's tender with the man that he's in love with, essentially, and you see all that on screen, and suddenly you have to rethink what that image looks like, because you might see it walking down the street and you think it means something, but you watch this story and you see what's going on inside. And I think anytime we can open ourselves to a movie like Moonlight, then we can expand our view of what's possible behind that image.
You mentioned religion as where some of these ideas come from. Where else does it come from as far as what you expect a black man to be?
Music?
Music, sports, culture. There's hypermasculinity is highly valued in our culture. And we live in a straight man's world. So I think we are trying our best to sort of adhere to those norms and those roles, but they're very limited and very one-sided. And, you know, I was thinking about the word masculinity in gay culture and the dating apps and the dating realms. There's this trend for a mask for mask. So it's guys looking for a masculine match as a sexual partner or as a romantic partner, to sort of adhere to these stereotypes. And it really is a form of drag. And RuPaul says that, you know, we're all born naked, but the rest of it is drag. It's like a Halloween costume. You can actually go to a store and pick up baggy jeans and a fitted baseball cap and a gold chain or the grill that Trevante Rhodes wears. And it is just that. It's a mask. And underneath it, there's this person who's trapped and imprisoned, unable to express himself, and able to be honest with who he is and authentic. And I think that's the real issue here, is that we're sort of not allowing our sons and our boys to express themselves and to be soft and tender and to have feelings and to, you know, be caring, which are sort of feminized by our culture and considered unworthy. And that's the problem. And, you know, there's this bottled up rage and anger that we see, and depression that we see these kids lashing out because they don't have these outlets, because they're not allowed to.
This is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's really, you know, it needs to be discussed, and I'm glad that these films are having a wide theatrical release, because people are talking about it, because if it didn't, we wouldn't know it exists. But it is very limiting, and there's a loss. We're losing our sons and our boys because we're not able to see their full potential and who they really are.
Did you want to jump in?
But I just want to say it's not all that bad in terms of for everyone, because when we also have to understand class as a very important role in how black masculinity is celebrated and has a space and a place to be what you want to be. Those very questions you're raising in terms of showing emotions, showing tenderness, feelings. So I think it's important to also look at black masculinities in terms of understanding class and location. Because working class black masculinity doesn't have access to the same resources as middle class black masculinity, and the ability to express themselves in narratives that speaks to feelings, that speak to the truth, that can celebrate what it means to failure, to be failure, and you can celebrate that. But within the working class black masculinity, failure is never celebrated. It's only toughness and success. So I think we need to also see the other side, in which there are aspects of our communities in which black masculinities is not under that same that stress, and it is celebrated, and it is rewarded for who it is. And to equally speak to that, I think is to put a balance to the picture.
Just to add to that, though, like when you're working class versus upper middle class, you're working to create an opportunity, right? For your family, for yourself, or whatever, and the performance of a hypermasculinity is connected to this idea that you'll be rewarded in general society for looking like you know what's going on, looking like you're in charge, looking like you can be a supervisor or a manager or a boss, right? So class really does matter, right? When you get to a higher socioeconomic class, parents, families, supports, opportunities are made through those circles. So if you do fail, an uncle can create another opportunity for you, right? If you don't make a lot of money, you can inherit something from them. So there's opportunities can be created the higher you go up in the socioeconomic chain. So when you get to like working class black masculinity, you're going to see a hypermasculine performance because the rest of society says you could be rewarded if you perform in this particular kind of way.
Yes.
But if you connect that to culture, working class black men produce most of what becomes
Popular culture.
popular culture.
Yep.
Also, working class black women. So if you
Yes.
look at where the blues comes from, you look at where hip hop comes from. This is actually there's a connection I think between maybe the intensity of that performance and sometimes the pressure it's under for both class and race reasons, and the culture that's produced as a result that then we all take on as our own popular culture.
Well, my husband is biracial, and he says he's never been more aware of his skin color than he has in Canada. He's lived in India, East Africa, and he's from the UK. I'm wondering, can you identify with that? Growing up, was that something that was made aware?
Well, I'd like to point out to my Canadian friends that the only place I've ever been called a nigger, pardon my use of the N-word, was in Canada. I was in Calgary studying, doing my MBA, and I was shocked because I grew up in a tourist town, Montego Bay, where, primarily black, but we have a lot of white tourists, and it never was a factor. Here, it matters. And I am now married to a white man, and people presume that just because I'm married, they've said, well, you don't understand the black experience because you're married to a white man. I was like, well, when I walk down the road,
You're still black.
I'm still black. I don't have him, attached surgically to my hip. So it is a unique experience for me to be in this space. I won't say it's outrightly hostile, but I do know that how I dress, when I wear a certain type of attire, the response I get, the reactions I get are certainly different. And so I have to, because it wouldn't happen to me in Jamaica, I wouldn't even think twice about it. But here, where I am definitely the minority, I have to be conscious of that. That's my experience.
Jonathan?
In the acting realm, in casting, and I remember doing this workshop once, and our acting coach was saying, Jonathan, as an African Canadian male, like in regards to American casting and TV and film, you have to sort of know the different types that you're playing and be able to convince the casting directors about the roles that you're up for. Because we live in Canada and we live in Toronto, it's a bubble, and we're almost colorblind to the different types of people that we see every day. We're so diverse, it's such a melting pot. But then if you go to the States, it's very segregated, and they do adhere to these stereotypes and these roles. For the moment, I was just kind of like, I thought my skin color was enough to be that I'm black. But he's like, so you have to really, study these different types of
blackness?
Of blackness, of caricatures that exist, because it's very different in the States than it is here in Canada. We are blessed to kind of see everyone as equals and have that, but
Parts of Canada.
Parts of Canada. I'll even say
the bubble,
I'll
right?
even say I'll even say no. I'll just say Toronto. I'm married there.
I don't know where you live. I want to live where you live.
Yeah. Let me retract that.
Cameron, how about you?
Racism's a problem in Canada, quite obviously. It affects not just black people, it certainly affects Indigenous people in a major, major way. It affects Muslims and many other people in major ways. Yeah. The biggest racism problem for me in Canada is denial. It's that it doesn't exist. It's that we don't have it here. We're not as bad as they are south of the border. And that's clearly not true. You look at outcomes on so many different levels in terms of education, employment, promotion, wealth in Canada. There are racial differences. So that doesn't happen by accident.
Question that we need to answer or even think about is there a sense of black masculinity that doesn't come out of white patriarchy? Like, do we need another starting point that's not colonialism or has residues of colonial ideology, where we can start thinking about black masculinities in all of their ranges, in all of their forms. And that's really hard to do because of the church, because of the education system, because of the state, and the ways in which our bodies have always been under the control of governments and colonial empires, really. So, I think that's the next struggle, really, is like we're at an intersectional moment for blackness in and of itself, and black masculinities need to get to a point where we can believe that there are origins of or ways in which black masculinity can exist that doesn't rely on, the breadwinner model, the man works outside of the home, bring home the bacon model, that is the cookie cutter model that we've been forced to perform in order to survive in a society in which we were brought to.
We only have a few minutes left. Jonathan, final word?
Off of Mark's last comment about survival, I feel like with hypermasculinity within the Black community, it is almost tribal. It is almost like a survival instinct to perform this, to get ahead, to survive, to navigate this world unscathed. And I wondered where that came from, what the origin of that is, and I wonder if it's linked to slavery. I wonder if all those years of being emasculated and oppressed by white people and white men, that need to sort of overcompensate, to be stronger than, to sort of retaliate. And I feel like that phrase, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so, like, as a tribe of the Black community, to have someone appear effeminate or be homosexual, it's almost like a threat to the community. And until immediately we disown you or we discard you, because we can't keep you with us if we're going to be strong. You pose a threat to our tribe. And so I think there's a bit of fear there. It's threatening. It challenges the idea that we have of who we think we are, and who we ought to be to survive. But it is about creating a dialogue and a discussion to unpack and unlearn those stigmas.
I want to bring it back to the movies, because we started talking about the movies. And Cameron, I wanted to give you the final question. What needs to change to open people up to more of a range for Black men when it comes to Hollywood and the stories that are told about Black?
I think the first thing is we need to see more of these stories, and we need to stop being surprised when they're successful. Every time there's a Black movie that does well at the box office, you see reports in the media saying Hidden Figures is overperformed or Ride Along is overperformed. They're just performing, right? There's a hunger, there's an appetite for these movies, so let's make more of them, let's watch more of them, and let's give opportunities for independent filmmakers as well, like Barry Jenkins, and there are many others, Steve McQueen, Dee Rees, who just had a new movie at the Sundance Film Festival. Remember, a lot of this is not just about Black men, it's about women as well, who are telling some of, I think, the most powerful stories about life in the African diaspora right now. Let's give them more space to tell their stories, and let's go out and watch them.
And that's it for tonight's agenda in the summer. Tomorrow, one of the most dramatic stories we've heard on the agenda, how Nicole Moore survived a full-on shark attack. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thanks for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. We'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.